All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And Roy, welcome, man. Good to have you with me today.
Kevin, it's always an honor when I get a chance to speak with you. So thank you for having me here and talking to your network.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that goes both ways. And you and I know we were just talking before we hit the record button. I'm like, man, time flies, because you and I met back in like September of 2017 when we had both gone to the baby bathwater event and landed at the airport and took a ride up to the place together and got to hang out a little bit for a few days. And time flies, man, because that's been a while. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of start off by setting some context, let everybody know a little bit about, what you do, who you serve, what motivates you to do what you do, and just kind of let everybody know, who is Roy?
Certainly. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, Kevin. Like I said, Roy Morejon. I'm president and co-founder of a company in Charlotte, North Carolina called Inventus Partners. We're a turnkey product launch firm that helps ideas come to market with their physical products. So what that means is basically if you have an idea, let's say for a product, and you just start with that napkin sketch of an idea, I have an entire engineering team that can make that idea come to life, right? So we can build it and make it, in our studio, in our shop. Then we have an entire studio space that can film it and photograph that idea. And then what we're really known for is launching those products using Kickstarter and crowdfunding as a means of validating that product through pre-sales. So we can see if there's actually a crowd for that product, for that idea, for that invention, before the inventor spends, tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars wasting money on something that no one else needs potentially. And then after, a successful campaign to which we've done almost 3,000 different products now, brought them to the market and successfully raised capital for them through Kickstarter. We also have, a full team that can handle all of the manufacturing for them with our factory set up in Taichung, Taiwan. And then we have an entire team also dedicated to the e-commerce and the Amazon scalability of the company, long after they launched their first product. So it's been a lot of fun. We've been doing that now for over a decade on my side in terms of the product launch side. And it's been really exciting. Like I said, over 3,000 different products we've helped launch. This past season, we had our 37th client on Shark Tank. So it's a lot of fun to kind of see products go from, the napkin sketch all the way to prime time.
Yeah. Wow. 37 of your clients have been on Shark Tank. That is awesome. Wow. So what are over 3,000 products that you've helped with. What are some of the most surprising things that you've seen, or the most surprising products that you've seen? I mean, for example, right before I saw a friend of mine post on Facebook, and I hadn't talked with him since 2020. Well, he just posted on Facebook yesterday, and I commented on his post, and then I found this article that they went from zero to right now. I think they just finished last year at 30 million, and 2 years in business. And I'm like, holy cow. And I didn't even know. And so I'm like congratulating him on this. I had no idea because I hadn't talked with him in a while. And I'm sure you've probably, maybe that's kind of a huge example there. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen stuff like that where you're just like, wow, that was bigger than I ever expected.
Yeah, we get surprised, not often. I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what works, what converts. Again, because launching a product to a platform like Kickstarter is a much different audience than launching a product on Amazon or launching a product on your Shopify or WooCommerce store, right? With Kickstarter, the audience is almost entirely early adopters. These are people that are willing to buy the thing before it exists because they want to be the first one in their neighborhood, in their city with that thing, right? To kind of have it as a show-off piece, if you will, especially when it comes to technology, hardware, even fashion products, which, kind of are the main categories that we get to play in. But overall, yeah, there are some products that absolutely surprise us. There was one probably 4, maybe 5 years ago now, maybe when we met, Kevin. It was for a custom molded high heel shoe.
Okay.
And when you think of a custom molded high heel shoe, for one, you don't think that it's something that should be crowdfunded, right? It's usually something that the person wants to go into the store and try it on and have an experience with it, walk around with it, see if they like the feel of it. And, you know, our data showed us that it looked like it might be, you know, a $250,000 campaign. And again, these campaigns only run for about 30 days, right? So, you know, $10,000 a day in sales would be kind of the high mark that we had set for it. And turns out there was an entire audience that we hadn't even thought about in terms of for this product. And that was actually with targeting this product towards the transgender community, where we hadn't even thought of that in terms of it being a massive problem for them to not be able to find footwear in their size that's, you know, custom molded to their foot. And lo and behold, the campaign takes off, it goes viral. We ended up raising just under $2 million for the campaign. And, you know, it became a huge success, and that brand is launched. We actually got that case study published as a Facebook success story on their website now. So that's, you know, just one of those things that, you know, you can find these audiences in these small niche groups where the product you didn't even know solves their problem.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the fun part about what we get to do. We get to do some of the most creative marketing testing for all of the products that are out there, simply because nobody's ever seen it before. This is the first exposure anybody's ever heard of this new thing. And a lot of times we're stopping people, you know, with just their thumbs from scrolling up and down and like, oh, what is that? I've got to look into it. And that curiosity kind of kicks in and like, oh, I totally have this problem. I didn't realize there was a solution for it now. And that's the fun part about what we get to do every day. You know, we average launching a new product to the market every single day. So it's always amazing what we get to see, what works, what doesn't work, and how we get to be, you know, so creative in terms of getting people curious about the inventions that we're working with.
Wow. That is really fascinating, man. Thanks for sharing that. You know, I can't tell you how many times in my entrepreneurial career where I've had those discoveries where you're like, wow, you know what? I would have never figured that out on my own, or I would have never thought about that, kind of like what you were just sharing. And it's cool when you make those kind of discoveries, for sure. So, well, I appreciate you sharing that, Roy. Okay, so I'll tell you what, now I want to switch gears a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners and stuff. And so have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not even be possible if not for this person? And Roy, I'm just excited to hear your story, your experience around this, as well as give you the opportunity to just honor somebody that's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business.
Absolutely. Well, I've got to start at the beginning with my parents, right?
Okay.
First and foremost, I got to give a shout out to mom and dad. And I think, you know, I learned a lot of the traits that I have in terms of being entrepreneurial and working extremely hard towards my vision and goals from my parents. So first and foremost, I got to give a shout out to them. But in terms of like another entrepreneur that kind of, let's say I grew up with, or that, you know, we were aligned very early on in my crowdfunding career, because that's not what I originally set out for my agency to do. And the only reason that I got introduced to this entrepreneur is because of my search engine optimization and marketing background of ranking first on Google for the term startup marketing. And that's where I got introduced to this entrepreneur, Chris Stoikos, back in 2013.
Okay.
This was basically the first or second year in our agency where we were actually working with crowdfunding products, because before we were just working with startups and helping them with their marketing. We had no idea what crowdfunding was until 2011, 2012. And when Chris reached out to us in 2013, he had a really unique product called, I believe it was called Vibe. And it was a vibrating bracelet that was kind of utilizing the newest Bluetooth technology at the time. And I know we're not even 10 years ago, but Bluetooth was like the newest thing back then, right? And he had this bracelet and he wanted to launch it and pre-sell the product, you know, through crowdfunding. And that's when I got introduced to him and started doing some marketing for his product. And I could tell Chris was a very unique inventor or idea guy, because he was always jumping onto the next next thing, right? The next opportunity, if you will. And with Vibe, I learned a lot, with working with an entrepreneur like that who, didn't have all of the focus necessarily, that was always looking for the next thing to do. And lo and behold, next year he had a new idea for reinventing the toolbox. So that's when he created Coolbox, which was, this toolbox with all of the newest gadgets and USB plugs and LED lights and all of that, because the main, metal toolbox in the garage had never been, disrupted, if you will. So he did that. And that's kind of what led us to, doing stuff with Shark Tank in terms of him getting on the show and doing a deal on the show with Lori, but that I don't think ended up working out ever. But it basically, opened that door to me working with him and understanding, that there's a larger community out there of like-minded entrepreneurs, that we were kind of the same age at the time. And then in 2015, he ended up launching Beard Club, or Dollar Beard Club at the time. And that's where I got introduced to some of his business partners, one of them being Alex Brown, who I'm good friends with. And, I think you've probably talked with some of Alex's good friends as well down in the Austin area. So big fan of Alex as well. But in 2016, Chris was launching his first mastermind, if you will, called Unconscious Content back in 2016. And this was the first time I'd ever been invited to, kind of this mastermind group of all of these high 7, 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs. And I just felt like I wasn't ready for that, as well as never have invested in myself. And I think that was a real big turning point for myself in terms of investing in myself and being, and I know you had this on the previous podcast, of being in the room with other people that are similar, or, just thought level type things where you didn't have to explain what you're doing. People just got it. And that was the first massive investment that I had made in myself in terms of going to one of these events and just networking with people. And it wasn't until that event where I met people like Brandon Hampton and Karen X, who was doing amazing things with video, and the amazing team in Australia with Sketchy and Alex Brown. And that was actually where I met Hollis Carter, the co-founder of Baby Bathwater. We were both in the sauna at the same time. And he was like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Well, I do this." And I was like, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he was like, "Well, I have this other group called Baby Bathwater." And he's like, "Well, if you like this, you'd probably like my group." So I was like, "Okay, cool." I'm, getting and understanding how important the network is, and really expanding my horizons outside of, the East Coast, and being out on the West Coast in the Hollywood Hills and meeting with all these amazing entrepreneurs that are doing amazing things, and really started to invest in myself there. So that's where the opportunity to really grow myself, as well as growing my network and really putting as much time and energy and effort into these relationships as much as I could, right? Like your network is your net worth, right? And I think I finally realized that, kind of going to these events now where, we have so much reliance on that now, especially during COVID, right? Where we couldn't do the face-to-face things or go to the events or do all of that, where it's like you're heavily leaning on the relationships you've built and the trust and the integrity and your reputation that you have over doing all of these things and being in these groups now. As I was saying earlier, I just got back from my 8th event now with the Baby Bathwater community. And I can't tell you how important being able to nurture those relationships and grow those relationships over the last 5, 6 years now has meant to not only me personally and growing myself, but also my business in terms of, helping some of those entrepreneurs with their issues or their products or whatever it may be. So, my shout out for this show, Kevin, is to Mr. Chris Stoiko.
That's awesome. So let's talk about just one or two big things that just really stand out in your mind that have happened and transpired as a result of the relationship you've had with Chris, or getting into these groups and really growing some relationships. What are some, one or two big things that just stand out for you that would have never happened if not for this?
Yeah, I think, one of the bigger things for myself is more or less the imposter syndrome type thing, right? Where it's a difficult thing to overcome, right? But then once you're in these groups, we're all similar, right? We're all there, we're all thinking the same thing. So, overcoming that hurdle definitely has been a big one, but also opening myself up to other opportunities that are out there outside of what I do from a day-to-day thing in terms of working with other entrepreneurs or helping them out. I've been able to do a lot of amazing things in my life and be able to do a lot of different marketing launches. So, my background can pretty much help anyone. And that's the value that I love giving, is just like, looking at things from an outside perspective and immediately, hopefully helping out, like what I was saying to you earlier with, these podcasts are going to be a great opportunity for you to, introduce other, people in your group to them to see if they're a good fit. Yeah. Where it's just like, I like being able to see the really big picture when someone presents me with their problems, right? Like I love working on other people's problems, not my own.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's always easier to see the solution for somebody else than it is to see the solution for our own self.
Yeah. Sometimes I just don't want to hear it. I know what I have to do, right? But it's more fun to solve other people's problems and help them along the way.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience around this. So Roy, for anybody listening going like, man, Kev, I really like Roy. I like the way he shows up and stuff. And man, I'm curious to know more about what he does. How can they find out more about what you guys do, Roy?
Sure. So you can just Google me, right? Or you can find my company, Inventus Partners. It is spelled a little bit differently. It's spelled ENVENTYS partners.com. You can also check out my podcast, where I get to interview amazing entrepreneurs and people that are startups launching their ideas with us many times at artofthekickstart.com. You can check out that podcast. You can look at our magazine publication, Inventors Digest. Or you can, subscribe to our newsletter at producthype.co, and you can see all of the cool inventions that we're getting to work with every single week.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Roy, thanks again. Any last things you want to share before we call it a wrap?
No, I honestly love helping other people. So please, if you do, don't be ashamed. Absolutely reach out. I will definitely reply.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Roy, thanks again for taking the time to have this conversation, to share your experience around this. Really appreciate it, my friend.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you, Kevin.